Welcome to our training series, Resiliency, the Antidote for Trauma. Welcome back to those of you who were with us through the first training on childhood trauma. In the second of our three-part training, we're going to look more specifically at resiliency. My name is Bobby Beal. I'm a clinical psychologist who's been working with children and families for over 25 years. As it turns out, a great portion of the people that I work with have experienced childhood trauma. It affects how they think, how they behave, and how they feel in the world. We need to have this background understanding in order to make our interventions and our work with these people as effective as possible. In this second part of our series, we're looking specifically at resiliency. Resiliency is an inner capacity that empowers kids, families, youth to successfully meet life's challenges. Everyone has this capacity. It's just how do we get it activated? How can we help facilitate it so that they can overcome the trauma or the negative experiences that they've had before they come to see us? Although there's a lot of negative effects of trauma, when we work with these kids, we see them as kids, smart, funny, engaging, motivated to do well. While we go through this training on resiliency, I'd like you to think about one or more kids that you work with and what are their strengths. Resiliency is all about strengths. What makes you like these kids? What makes you want to engage with them? What makes you want to work with and help these kids and their families overcome some of the traumas and tragedies in their lives? Think about their strengths. If you would, take a moment to write down 3 to 5 strengths or assets that you think your kids possess. So, what's the answer or the solution to trauma? We know that over 60% of people experience some sort of childhood trauma. But there are lots of people out there who do very well despite the fact that they've had any trauma background. We believe now, in looking through the research around trauma and resiliency, that it is resiliency factors that make the difference. The truth is, people not only survive, but can do very well even after experiencing childhood trauma. How does this happen? What makes a difference between somebody who just survives and somebody who thrives? Let's start by looking at a definition of resiliency. Resiliency is an inner capacity that, when nurtured, facilitated, and supported by others, empowers youth, children, and families to successfully meet life's challenges with a sense of hope, self-determination, mastery, and well-being. This definition was captured on the website resiliency.ohio.org. This is a definition that has been worked on by many families and children who have experienced all sorts of negative life experiences. And this is what they felt was important in understanding resiliency. Even though everyone has a resilient capacity inside of them, sometimes it needs a little help or encouragement to activate their resilient features, and that's where we come in. As providers of social services and clinical services, it's our job to make sure that they have the opportunity and the availability to activate their own resilient characteristics so that they can feel good about themselves, do well out in the world, and be successful at life. Ann Maston is a leading researcher in resiliency and stress. In her article on Ordinary Magic, she tells us that resilience does not come from something outside, from some rare or special quality, but from the everyday magic of ordinary human relationships and human resources. This comes from the minds, brains, and bodies of the children that we work with, from the families and support people that they live with, and from relationships with others in their communities. Developmental resilience tells us that the concepts of stress and resilience are intertwined. The latter does not exist without the presence of the former. What this means is that if there were no stressors or motivators in our lives, we wouldn't need resiliency. We wouldn't need to overcome anything. We wouldn't be motivated to learn and grow in those directions. So it's actually the presence of stress, trauma, challenge in our lives that brings to the forefront the resilience that is present in everyone. So the study of resiliency grew directly out of the research and study of risk and stress. In every population of highly stressed or challenged individuals, researchers found people who not only lived through it, but overcame it and did exceptionally well. What makes these people do that? What's the difference between somebody who struggles and doesn't feel good about themselves and doesn't have such good outcomes, and the people who feel challenged by it, successfully overcome it, and go on to even help other people? We want to look at what factors predicted these more positive outcomes. Remember, the ACE study told us that over 60% of people have at least one ACE marker, and over 20% of people have 3 or more, putting them at significantly higher risk for poor physical and behavioral health outcomes. But lots of people really do just fine. How do they do it? Let's look further at these resiliency characteristics. What does resiliency look like specifically? Well, first of all, let's think about personal strengths. They break down into 4 areas. Number 1, social competence. Number 2, problem solving. Number 3, a sense of autonomy. And number 4, a sense of purpose. By the way, no one has all of these things. Everyone has some of these things or different parts of all of these things. The youth and family perspective on resiliency is very important. In your work with kids and families, you need to frequently ask what supports them through their difficult times and challenges. What motivates them? What are their sources of resiliency? They have fabulous answers for you. Throughout this presentation, we will try to show you some perspectives from youth and family directly. They will offer us their perspectives on how they overcame challenges and found their own resiliency.
Our family has been very fortunate to have a number of mental health support people who have brought so much to our lives, and especially have been a blessing to Bill. And all of those people liked him, and they let him know that he was likable and lovable. Even when he had challenging moments, they liked him, and they could point out those things that were his gifts in the midst of a meltdown. And that was so amazing, because he could come back and regroup and know that they would still see him in a positive light.
I've had a lot of people in my life who've really been rooting for me, and I've helped them through some hard times too. As long as you've got people who care about you and people you care about, you're going to be good.
Let's start with social competence. It's comprised of many factors. Let me list a few of them for you. First of all, there's responsiveness. Now, when I first looked at that characteristic of responsiveness, I thought it must mean how they respond to other people. So, for instance, how they respond to me when they come in to see me in an office or at a group session. But actually, what the research shows us is that these kids elicit responsiveness from others. When they have a resilient social competence of responsiveness, kids who have been through traumas actually seek out available adults, even if their own caretakers are not available or helpful or even abusive. They seek out available adults who can give them attention, love, and nurturance that they need to be successful. So responsiveness is very helpful to them in terms of making them feel accepted, connected, and better about themselves in general. Next would come communication. Communication, as we all know, is a critical skill. It enables us to make connections and build relationships. If you have trouble with communication, you're really going to have difficulty both with social competence and making connections with anybody out in the world. So communication skills are critical.
School-wise, I've just had to try harder to be focused, and again open my mouth and say, I know I wasn't able to do this, but what can I do to make up for this? I think it's very important that people who have mental health problems know that it's very important for you to speak. You have to talk, because again, if you don't talk, people don't know.
Empathy is another area of social competence. The ability to know how others feel and, sometimes more importantly, to take their perspective really helps people understand other people, helps them align with other people, helps them feel what other people are feeling. Along with that is compassion and altruism. Compassion is the desire to help alleviate somebody else's suffering. This can be particularly helpful for our kids who have suffered trauma because nothing is more helpful or beneficial than helping someone else. It's a marker for decreased depression. If you are able to step out of yourself and your own suffering, you're less likely to suffer from depression and suicidal ideation. Altruism is when you want to help other people even though it will not benefit yourself. The trick to that, of course, is just being altruistic does benefit you. You get bounce back from that. You get emotional rewards for being altruistic. So it's a really difficult kind of concept. You do it because you don't have to and because it's going to help somebody else, not you. But in the long run, it does help you. Altruism is empathy in action.
We're very involved in giving back in our community. And I think by giving back to other people, it's made us feel as though we can help other people. We're not the bottom of the barrel, so to speak.
Forgiveness is another thing I'd like to mention here. Although forgiveness is not identified as a social competence characteristic, it is important. What the research has found is that if you are able to forgive yourself and forgive others, even abusers, it's positively correlated with mental health and well-being. This idea that you're sort of letting go of the negatives is very beneficial to you in the long run. You may remember from the last series that over 75% of the kids that I work with have experienced childhood trauma. In the groups that we do, I look for kids to exercise some of these resiliency skills, and a group setting is a great place to see their social competence. One of the kids I'd like to talk about right now is the helper kid. So we give the kids group problems to solve. It requires them to rehearse their communication skills, to be responsive to each other, to sometimes take the perspective from another, working on all of these skills kind of simultaneously. That's great, but once in a while, I get a kid who does not step up and take a lead. He doesn't contribute great problem-solving ideas. He doesn't coach others in what's the best thing to do. He's really a follower. How does this explain his social competence? Because he has strong social competence skills. Here's the trick. He helps everyone else. He makes sure they feel okay. He's the one who will say, I'm not sure we heard from so-and-so, and solicits their information. So he's not so much the leader, but he's a great follower, he's a great helper, and he's very attuned to the other kids in the group. That is his social competence. It might not look like the biggest social competence on this list, but honestly, the compassion that he shows and sort of the under-the-radar communication with others to get them to speak out, it's a real skill. So, I'd like you to think about your kid. What is their area of social competence? Do they elicit responsiveness in others? Are they good communicators? Do they have empathy? Can you get them to take the perspective of someone else? How about their compassion? Is there anything that they would do for others? Let's move on to the next area, problem solving. Honestly, I struggle a little bit with this area as a resiliency area because when kids come into us for services at the mental health center where I work, this is an area that they're deeply lacking. They have difficulties with problem solving because they're so reactive. They don't think things through and try to solve the problem. They simply react to the situation. One of our jobs is to help them take a deep breath, think for a minute, and make a planful attempt to solve the problem. So let's start there, planning. It's interesting to note that the skill of planning is generally developed between the ages of 3 and 4. I would have thought it was in high school or even college, but no, kids develop this notion of planning or what's next all the way down at age 3. What it does is give them a sense of control. If they can plan what's next or what might happen later, they feel more in control of what their future holds. If they have a sense of control about the future, they can have hope for the future. Next would be flexibility. If you are flexible in your problem-solving skills, you can see alternatives. One of the problems with the kids who experience trauma, they get in that reactivity mode and they can only see one solution to every problem. And generally, unfortunately, it's related to aggressiveness or violence. When they start to learn the skill of flexibility, they can see that there are other alternatives. And not only can they see other alternatives, they can do trials. They can attempt an alternative solution. How'd that work out for them? They could try something else if they didn't like that solution. So you begin to see that trial and error work going on in the problem-solving abilities. The next characteristic is resourcefulness. This is a critical survival skill. This involves being able to identify external resources. Who can help me? How can they help me? What do I need in this situation? Where can I find this? Are there any places other than that I can find this? Resourcefulness probably is the key characteristic under problem solving to help you. If you can identify external resources, you can solve or get assistance to solve virtually anything. One of the interesting things about resourcefulness is people who are exceptionally resourceful are not necessarily people who follow the rules. These are people who think out of the box. These are people who are willing to rewrite the script so that they can get the results that they want or need. Resourcefulness can be a bit of a two-edged sword. Sometimes their very resourcefulness can get them in trouble, but we really need to start looking at this as a problem-solving strength. Next is critical thinking. Critical thinking are all the higher level thinking abilities. It's your ability to understand context, not just content. It's your ability to think beyond your surface impression and really look for deeper meaning. Critical thinking does come with age, and so I wouldn't expect critical thinking in my youngest kids that I work with, but I would start looking for it late elementary and middle school age. Are they able to infer things? Can they figure things out when they don't have all the facts? Being able to think critically is very important to solving problems. At the absolute highest end, though, is insight. It is the deepest form of problem solving. It's sometimes difficult to articulate because insight means that you leap to a conclusion, that it dawns on you. Perhaps it's an epiphany of understanding. And so it's difficult to draw a straight line from a problem to insight. However, when you have insight, you feel very competent about being able to solve problems. Sometimes, as I said earlier, it's tough to see strengths in this area. Think about your kid. Do they have any of these problem-solving strengths? Do they show signs of having these problem-solving strengths? We want to find out what they're good at and help expand those so that they become true strengths and they can solve all the problems that come to them in life. Next category is autonomy. Autonomy is a sense that I have some control over my life and I have some power over my future. One of the things that you have to do to be autonomous is have a positive self-identity. This is an adolescent job. You have to develop a coherent sense of your internal stable self, apart from and different from anybody else you are with. It's very typical in adolescence to sort of wear the coat or wear the clothing of whatever group you're with. You can meld into one group of jocks or preps or whatever you want, and then when you go to a different group, you take on their characteristics. That's all fine through adolescence to explore different parts of your identity, but your task is to come up with some coherent sense of yourself apart from all of that. You might be partly something and partly something else, but you have to begin to sense for yourself, this is who I am. Another thing that's necessary to do that is to have an internal locus of control. If I think things outside of me are always in control of me, it is very difficult for me to feel good or positive about my internal self. I have to have some sense of being in charge, having personal power, being in control of what goes on. If I think that external forces are always going to control me, I remain a victim. I remain buffeted by the winds of anything that comes by. If I can say I have an internal locus of control and feel that, then I feel that I have some say over what's going on in my life, that I have some control, at least over the circle of influence that I can reach. That is very beneficial for autonomy. Self-efficacy. This is a very interesting characteristic. It is the belief that you can accomplish something, that you can do it, that you have the skills and the attributes and the desire to make something happen. You believe in yourself. Now, the interesting part about this is it's a belief, not necessarily an action or a reality. Research has shown us that if you believe you can accomplish something, that's all it takes. That is health protective. It doesn't matter that you don't quite have the skill or that you don't quite have the follow-through. If you believe in yourself, that's a very positive thing for both your emotional and your physical health. Another characteristic is adaptive distancing. This includes detaching yourself from dysfunction. This can be very difficult and again also occurs around that adolescent period. It's unlikely to find kids who detach themselves in elementary or early childhood stages. This is why. If you have to detach yourself from dysfunction, it may be that you've suffered abuse or neglect at the hands of those who should be taking care of you. It's very difficult to distance yourself from them when you're dependent upon them at the same time. However, as you go through adolescence, that becomes your task. You need to separate yourself from the things that you don't agree with, that you don't want to be like, that you don't want to replicate or repeat. The more you can distance and detach yourself from that, the more likely you are to be successful at forming your own positive identity and moving forward with your life in a positive direction. Self-awareness and/or mindfulness. Self-awareness is the non-judgmental attention to your inner states. If you are able to have self-awareness, you are well on your way to self-regulation. And if you remember, when you suffer through a lot of trauma, self-regulation is tough to come by. You're very reactive and you have a decreased ability to modulate your emotional and behavioral states. If you can practice mindfulness, looking inward, paying attention to yourself, what you think and what you feel, not just follow the crowd, not just agree to or listen to people and what they have to say about you, but really listen to your inner self, you are well on your way to self-regulating and being able to manage your own emotions and behaviors. As a matter of fact, the process of mindfulness, taking deep breaths, thinking about what you're feeling, is helpful for both physical and emotional health across the board. The last characteristic under autonomy that I'd like to mention is humor. Humor plays so many roles. It is both a social competency, because who doesn't like somebody who's easygoing, funny, tells jokes? You're willing to have relationships with those sorts of people. And it can also be used as emotional transformation. You can use humor to flip sadness or fear over to happiness or laughter. If you can find humor in your situation, particularly if you can appropriately find humor in yourself, then you can feel confident in social situations. You aren't afraid of other people making fun of you, and you can feel good about where you came from and where you're going, even though there were negative events around you.
If you can sit back and laugh, it gives you the courage to go on.
Not all days are super, but what we like to do to get through them is use a sense of humor. And I have kind of a wacky one, I've been told, which has come in really handy with our family. Peter kind of inherited my son the wacky sense of humor, which has been good. We can laugh at the stupidest things.
Laughing cures everything. Something about it just makes you feel good afterwards. Even if you've had a really crappy day and you've had just a whole bunch of stuff go wrong, if you're able to come home, look in the mirror, and see that you've had all day a piece of spinach in between your teeth, and then you just burst out laughing, just because it's like, oh well. Being able to use laughter as a way to recover from a problem that you've had, it's very important.
Let's explore sense of purpose for a few minutes. Sense of purpose in general means that your life has meaning and that you feel that you have a place in the universe. There are several different characteristics that feed into sense of purpose. Let's look first at motivation and aspirations. This is a future orientation. Think about the kids that you work with. Do they talk about the future? Do they have plans for the future? Do they think about things that they're going to accomplish or goals that they'd like to meet in the future? That's an indication that they have a future orientation and they're motivated to move forward. Another area is special interests and/or creativity. Think about hobbies, activities that they enjoy, things that they would do if they had free time. This offers several things related to sense of purpose. First of all, there's some task mastery. They do something, they feel good about it, they probably do it well, they do more of it. But the other thing that these special interests do is offer a buffer. When things aren't going well for them, they have a place to escape to. They have things that make them feel better. They have hobbies and practices that they can do when they want to shut out the rest of the world or perhaps the negative things that are happening, that make them feel better, creative, helpful, things that make them feel optimistic about life.
It's really important, and what a lot of providers that I've worked with have just completely ignored was they've always focused on what was wrong with me, and they never really focused on what I did well. Services shouldn't be based around your faults, they should be based around what you're good at and what you enjoy.
For Peter, his video games have been the key to his resiliency because he's so about video games. And his mom realizes that and goes out and spends the money for video games. And for me, it's music. And for Billy, it's horseback riding. So I think our parents realize the keys to what makes us resilient and then help us go towards them.
Optimism and hope are a positive motivational stance. They feel like things will get better and that they have some sense of control and purpose in their future. Optimism is really about your thoughts and beliefs, and hope is more about your feelings and your emotions around those things.
I really think that hope and optimism are just keys. And I think it's true for all people, but especially for young people who may have challenges, may feel like the world is not very accepting, and they look at various times in their life that look almost hopeless, that people don't expect that they're going to achieve. People are not expecting them to make it. People don't believe that they're going to grow into adulthood with, some purpose in life. So for people who see that and can help the young person hold on to that or move beyond whatever the disconnect is, whether a time in their life that they're down or a time that they've failed at something and they don't want to hold on to that forever, but they don't know how to get out of it. For those supportive people and providers around the young person to be able to move them forward, to help them see that there are things ahead in life that will be good. And I'm going to help you get there. I believe in you, and we're going to find a plan and we're going to help you get there.
There have been some times in my life where I felt hopeless. You have to find something that's a quick fix, and eventually when you see that's fixed, then you'll be like, oh, I fixed that. Let's try to fix this part of my life, and this part of my life, and this part of my life. And in the meantime, the hope is rising while the hopelessness is falling. And it's really important that you realize that it just has to be a little thing, just a little thing to feel hopeful about, and that can make all the difference.
Faith and spirituality. It's an interesting category. Note that it doesn't say religion specifically. What they found is that having some sense of faith or spirituality is what it takes to make meaning out of your life. You don't have to belong or participate in an active religious group, but you do have to have some idea about why you're here and what your life means. Even kids want to know why things happen. When we ask the questions why, we can organize and put things in place. Even bad things can be organized and integrated into our brains. This decreases depression and anxiety. Frankly, understanding why things happen and being able to say things happen even when I don't want them to happen is part of the idea behind trauma narrative. Taking past events and putting them in their place helps heal your inability to access those higher areas in your brain. Now let's go back and think again about your kid. Do they have a belief that their life has meaning? Do they have optimism about the future? Do they know why they're here and what their life means? Let's shift gears for a moment from kids' resilient factors to you, the provider. Robert Brooks says that we need resilient mindsets. Our mindset is the assumptions and expectations that we have for ourselves and others that guides our behaviors and our interactions. We need really good, positive mindsets. As a matter of fact, we need resilient mindsets. These can help those who touch the hearts and minds of children and youth with special needs. That's the providers. We need to stay in a resilient mindset so that we can positively affect them. Here are some of the beliefs of people who have resilient mindsets. We believe that my mistakes are experiences from which to learn, opportunities to learn from, rather than setbacks. I believe that I have a sense of humor, including being able to laugh at, but not ridicule, myself. It's critical that the kids see us laugh at ourselves. It's critical that they see it's okay. It doesn't incapacitate you, and it doesn't make you unable to help others. We all make mistakes. We all do things that are laughable. But do we try to rush by them, or do we just accept them, laugh, and go on? Another belief of a resilient mindset is appreciation and comfort with people. That might sound strange, but it's very true. You need to be able to appreciate even those tough kids on your case list. Find their strengths. Find things that make you want to connect with them. Be comfortable with them in their discomfort so that you can help, model, and support. You also have to believe that you can solve problems and make decisions. And I would go a step further and say you have to have a belief that there is more than one solution to any given problem. There's a lot of ways to solve problems, and you want to be able to show that you can do a variety of things. If you have a mindset that there's one best answer, too often the kids that we work with will not have the singular best answer, and they'll feel like they're not rising up to your expectations or they're not doing it right. Also, we can model making decisions. Doesn't mean your decision has to be perfect or correct every time, but we try not to get locked into indecision. We try to say, well, here's what I'm going to try this time. Next, you have to believe that you can make a positive difference in the world. I think most of us do believe that. We're in social services and clinical services work because we do want to make a positive difference in the world. But every once in a while, it's good to revisit that and really take it in and believe it again. You also have to know your strengths. Don't use false modesty. Don't say, I'm not any good or I don't know how to do something, when in reality you do. Make sure that you're raising your strengths out, that you're showing them to people and saying, here's what I'm good at. Here's what I can do. Here's how I can help you. But at the same time, don't avoid any problems. Be honest about them as well. Honestly, to be transparent and let people know about your strengths and weaknesses is an excellent way to make positive connections with them. So, Robert Brooks has 3 C's to practice a resilient mindset. I'm going to go over each one of them because I think they're critical for us to understand. Number 1, commitment. Discover what brings purpose to your life and work for it. I hope you've been able to see that I'm passionate about these topics, and I am committed to bringing you as much information and helpful resources and strategies as possible. It makes me excited to think that people will see this and be able to use some of these strategies at work with more kids. The second thing is challenge. Interpret difficult situations as opportunities. Please don't see them as setbacks or impossibilities. Always look at a challenge and think about, how can I overcome this? How can I make this the best situation possible? What will I learn from this? What can I help others with? And finally, control. We only have control over certain things. I can't control the weather. I can't control all sorts of things outside of my scope of influence. I need to focus my time and energy on things that I can have an influence over. I can have an influence over the clients that I work with. I can have an influence over my family. I can have an influence over my attitude and my beliefs. I want to make sure that I exercise my ability to control things that I truly have an ability to control. So, let's say we have a positive mindset, a resilient mindset. Now, back to the kids. How do we foster their resiliency? Because one of the problems with trauma, and particularly ongoing stress trauma, is that they miss developmental stages. They miss the building blocks of resiliency. Blaustein and Kinneberg have come up with 3 major building blocks for fostering resiliency: attachment, self-regulation, and competency. Within each one of these, they have specific ideas and strategies backed by lots of research that will help us foster resiliency in the kids that we work with. First of all, under attachment, we want to model affect management. We also want to work with the caregivers to model affect management. We all pick up the habits and responses that we grew up with the adults around us. It's important that we model appropriate affect management. The second thing under attachment is that it's important that caretakers are attuned and consistent in responding to kids. They need to be on the same page with them. They need to be aware when they have needs that need to be met. They need to meet those needs quickly, and they need to do it in a consistent fashion. Working with caretakers to understand this is very important. I've had many conversations with caretakers who think that letting their kid cry is a good practice because it toughens them up. But in truth, at young ages, they need to be taken care of as quickly as possible because it makes them more resilient later on when the caretaker is not at their elbow, perhaps in adolescence or even into adulthood, to take care of things for them. We want to strengthen that resiliency. Caretakers need to be very attuned to their children and to be very consistent in their responses. The third area in attachment is to provide routines and rituals. While this is important in the home and for the caretaker, it is equally important for providers. We have meetings, sessions, activities with these kids. Are we following routines? Do we allow them to feel comfortable and to understand and know what's happening at all times? Do we explain all procedures and interventions so that they can understand it? One thing that pops into my mind about this is the medical health care field. When you go in to see somebody or to have a procedure in a hospital, a lot of things happen to you. There are IVs, and there are people who come and talk to you, and there's anesthetic, and there's all these different things. The best experience that people can have when they have to go through some sort of major medical experience is to have somebody by their side who explains everything as it happens. It completely reduces the anxiety in the situation. It allows people to accept the medical intervention and recover quicker. I believe the same thing is true in our work. As we do interventions with kids and families, constantly educating them and supporting their knowledge around these issues will ease the way so that our interventions are accepted and effective. The next building block in fostering resiliency is self-regulation. We talked a lot about self-regulation already. It's a critical component to being resilient. Before you can regulate yourself, however, you have to be able to identify emotions. Unfortunately, we aren't very good in this culture at identifying emotions. As a matter of fact, some would argue that we spend some time avoiding emotions, that we do things like overeating and drinking and using substances to avoid some emotions. It's very important that we have interventions and activities that help kids identify their emotions. Once we identify those emotions, you can work on modulation. How do you let those emotions out? Can you keep them under control? When is it okay to have bigger emotions and littler emotions? And then finally, under self-regulation is affect expression. What is the appropriate way to express things like anger, fear, terror? If we have the emotions, they will be expressed. Let's figure out the best way to do so. And finally, the third building block is competency. We need to help strengthen these kids' executive functioning. Remember, the higher brain functions get out of ratio when you experience chronic or traumatic stress. That means they have a deficit in executive functioning. Things like higher order thinking skills, planning, sequencing, all of these things need to be addressed. In addition, self-development and identity. We talked a little bit about a lot of this happens in adolescence, developing a positive self-identity and understanding what you might want to do or where you're going into the future. So these are the building blocks that foster resiliency. How else can we increase resiliency in our work with kids? I looked at lots of resiliency research and information. I scoured the books and the libraries, and I have distilled it to 4 key concepts that help me to stay focused in my practice with kids. If I can keep focused on these 4 ideas, I know that it's helpful to them and that I'm working to increase or activate their resiliency. These 4 areas include connections, choices, competencies, and contributions. Let's start with connections. First of all, take the advice of Robert Brooks. Be a charismatic adult. This does not mean that you have to sing and dance and have ready jokes at all times. What it does mean is that you need to be warm, engaging, supportive, and, most important, non-judgmental. This is accepting the kids where they are. If you are consistent and predictable, they will come to feel safe with you. They will start to share with you. They will be able to do the very difficult work of trauma work. Next, you need to provide appropriate social encounters. It's not just about connections with you, it's about being able to connect with their peers. Everyone needs friends. Everyone needs other people to relate to and get along with. So provide peer group activities. If they aren't able to participate in community group activities like Scouts or the Y or church groups because of some of their impulsive and aggressive behaviors, then we need to be providing socialization activities for them. In addition, these socialization activities need to be staffed with safe adults who all take on those characteristics of warm, engaging, supportive, and non-judgmental attitudes. Finally, if something isn't working, please try something else. If somebody is not getting along with somebody else, would it help to have a different person intervene? Would it help to switch providers or switch workers? Maybe. Think about that. But you know, the best way to figure out if something isn't working and what else might is ask them. Talk to the kids, talk to the families. If you're not feeling like you're making progress with this family or your interventions aren't going somewhere, maybe your connection or your alliance with them isn't great. Talk to them. There's nobody to blame here. We're all doing the best we can, but shift gears.
When it comes to me, when it comes to how I feel, when it comes to how things work best with me, I'm the one who is the expert. I am the be-all, end-all when it comes to me, because no one else knows me like I know me. And it's important because if you don't listen to what the person has to say, I remember I was at a meeting and I would say that a certain service was not going to work for me because I didn't like the idea of the service. And they said, well, what you're doing is you're making it so, since you're saying that, since you're in that mindset, it's definitely not going to work. When I say something is not going to work, I don't say that because I don't want it to work. Why would I not want something to work? I'm saying it because it won't work. So it's important that providers realize this, that I don't go out of my way to make sure that my services don't work and see that I stay a mess. I say that these things don't work so that we can discard that and find something that will work.
When kids begin to feel safe with you, negative behaviors will naturally begin to decrease. Choices. Arguably, one of the best interventions we have. If you could provide a choice frequently with your work with kids, it engages their brain so quickly, it's excellent. You should always offer acceptable alternatives. One of the reasons adults resist providing choices, besides adults just saying, I'm the authority figure, they should have to do what I tell them to do, is that they have trouble thinking up acceptable alternatives. All they can think about is the goal that they need. If I need the chore done, or if I need the homework done, or if I need them to stop fighting, I can't think of alternatives to get to that point. But I want to challenge you to start thinking in this way. You need to offer acceptable alternatives and allow our kids to choose what they want to do. Giving them choices gives them a sense of control. It will also increase their engagement with you, and it stimulates their brain into higher order thinking. So instead of saying no or don't do that, try brainstorming together. Ask them, what are you trying to accomplish? What do you need? What's your goal? What would you like right now? You could also ask them questions like, what is everybody else doing if you need them to be more compliant? You can cue them in to social cues and say, look at how everyone else is lined up, or look at how everyone else is studying, or look at how everyone else is in their seats. What should you be doing at this time? Instead of saying you're bad or you're wrong for being out of place or not in sync with everybody else, try to help coach them into aligning with what's going on. You definitely want to offer choices that will help kids develop pro-social behaviors and skills. By the way, this is not a choice. Do this or else. Some adults think that is a choice. The problem is it's not. It's a command and a threat. It's not a true choice. You need to offer, again, choices that are both acceptable. Don't punish kids for what they don't know or for making a poor choice. Offer them other alternatives. Competencies or skill building. Children are not born knowing skills. They learn every skill, from how to walk and talk to how to drive a car and go to college. The only way kids learn skills is through us modeling, teaching, then rehearsing and reinforcing those skills. Let's remember that the root meaning of discipline is to teach, not to punish or discipline. Let's think about a 16-year-old who's learning to drive. We don't put them behind the wheel of a car, let them go, and then punish them for every error that they make the first time they sit in a car. Instead, we let them read about it, we let them practice, perhaps in the driveway or on a dirt road. We teach them all the skills they need, including what do you pay attention to, where do you look, where's your brake pedal, before we turn them loose on the road. As a matter of fact, most of us, I would say, send them off to a professional instructor in how to drive. That's very helpful. We do not want to punish them for skills that they haven't learned yet, nor do we want to turn them loose to run other people down before they have the skills. Timing is everything. Please remember that all behavior has purpose. We need to make a case for why our pro-social behaviors are important, and I believe that kids are ready to hear that. Children don't want to be bad, but if they don't have the skills, they can't cope, and they react. Those reactions might be impulsive or aggressive or even violent. But if we give them different skill sets so that they can act in a way that gets their needs met and doesn't get them in trouble, everyone's happier. Punishment will never teach the skills. Skill building, competency building will do the trick. So let's rethink skill building for a moment, because I do think it takes a shift in our attention. Instead of thinking that's an intentional misbehavior, think that's a lack of skill. Have a skill deficit perspective. Instead of thinking, I could shame them for not understanding this or not knowing this, build the missing skills. Think nurture, not criticism. Think teach, not blame. And please, think discipline, not punishment. If you can reframe misbehaviors as a skill deficit instead, it will lessen your response and reaction to the child. You won't feel angry. You won't feel like you need to punish them. It will invite interventions and skill building so that they can make progress instead of just looking at what they did wrong or bad. Contributions, giving back, giving to others. Everyone feels good when they contribute. There's a lot of ways for kids to contribute. Some of the best interventions that I've both engaged in and read about on other people's parts are when they engage kids who are having trouble, struggling socially or even academically, in helping out. Chores are a great place to start. As long as the chores are age appropriate, they will help the child to feel connected to their family. They increase skills, they get to rehearse competencies, they provide for personal responsibility. Really, the end result of doing chores well is all positive. You have to watch out and make sure that they're not being parentified or taking on chores or responsibilities that belong to other people in the family. But honestly, there are great places to find lists of chores that are age appropriate and applied to the appropriate level kid. It's really helpful in making them feel like they're a part of and they contribute and they are needed in their family. The same goes for classroom or group tasks. Find things that they can assist with or help with, and it really helps them feel better about themselves and about the fact that they aren't just a sum total of their mistakes or their dysfunctions. They really have something to contribute. In summary, we understand that trauma affects the brain. It really affects the brain in very specific ways, but we know that brains can be rebuilt. We can create new neural pathways with these children, and the more we can rehearse and reinforce these pathways, the more likely they are to be able to access those pathways instead of their reactive, impulsive pathways. Resiliency is the antidote for traumatized brains. Providing choices, allowing them to feel competent, connected, and make contributions to everyone else is really the way to get those brains going. Be sure to check out the third training in this series, where we'll be talking about how providers can nurture, facilitate, and support resiliency factors. We're going to get very specific about interventions that you can do with kids and families to increase the likelihood of their resiliency.